It was hard to hear.
All right. We're the only people in the room just yet.
Good, then I can figure out how we.
There's Tony. Hi, Tony. And Scott's here, and Paul, and Judy, and excellent. There's Dad. All right.
Gus.
Gus and Mike and Mike. Oh, we have you. Mike, you're muted. Let me unmute you for a sec. I don't think yeah, you're not connected to video, to audio. All right, does everybody have a train station? Y'all ready to get on the train?
Woo-hoo.
Chugga like a choo-choo. That is the hashtag that, hi Barb. My girlfriends decided that we needed, this wine needed a hashtag. And we decided it should be chugga like a choo-choo because everybody should be getting on the train. So we are going to join you since we're obviously behind at least some of you, like Scott. So cheers, Mama.
Cheers.
Cheers, everybody. Nice to see you all. And this is great. It's 5:01. How's everybody doing today? We should give everybody a few minutes to show up. So, Mike, you connected yet? Did you figure it out?
It's connecting.
Not quite.
Paul, where's Paul? He's out in the vineyard.
Nice! I like that. Paul, I'm going to unmute you. You can tell us when you took that photo.
When?
Yeah.
It's one of the tours, probably 2019, I think, or 18. I can't remember which.
All right.
All right,
Well,
nice.
that's a beautiful photo.
Yeah.
Lovely, lovely. And it includes some of the rows that go into this wine. So apropos of the tasting. Oh, we got Gusser, we got a Drish. Drish, we need to see your face. Manny's here. Nice to see you, Manny.
Hey, Manny.
So we are going to put Manny on the spot next week because when we talk about Chardonnay, we get all of our barrels for the Chardonnay from Manny. And so so since you guys all wanted to know about barrels, we're hitting up the expert. Manny, do you want to say hello? Okay, now I unmuted you. Go ahead.
I'll have some photos for you about how barrels are made next week and a short video that shows you how we harvest the trees.
Perfect.
Yeah, it'd be really cool.
And we'll show you how we turn those into world-class Chardonnay.
Yeah.
Yummy. Oh, there's Dan.
Yeah, because for the record, Manny doesn't drink a lot of white wines, but he does drink our Chardonnay.
Yeah, you're drinking it now.
You remember that, huh?
Nice. Well done, sir. Well
That's
done.
okay.
Well done. So.
That and Chablis.
Oh. Well, next week, we'll have to make sure you have Cope Bonneville. We'll have to make sure you have the good stuff in your glass. So, all right. Should we give people a few more minutes or just start talking about train station? Adrish, where's your face?
Yeah, that's a beautiful picture of you, Drish, but where are you? That was it.
Yep, and here's
Working on
Ed. It's nice to see Ed. So, all right. This would be the perfect time for Ed to change his background to the train station because he took a picture at the train station for this purpose not too long ago. So we'll want to see that. We're holding on for it. And that brings up the whole reason of why we started making train station. So we, as you guys know, we planted the vineyard in 1992. Started the, that is, did you make them? No? Oh man, I'd be super excited. So, yeah. Started the vineyard, planted the vineyard in 1992. It established itself as a world-class vineyard in the first decade that it was
Oh,
around.
there's Harvey.
Hi, Harvey, nice to see you.
Hey.
Then we started the winery in 2001 to focus on our spectacular site with very classic traditional styles like we've been talking about. And then 15 years after having the winery, we opened our tasting room in the historic train station. And the cool thing about the train station is that Cote Bonneville is the family estate, family name. All of the Cote labels have the pictures of the house on them. This is the same entrance portico from different directions. And so we have all those cool pictures of the old building on these bottles. That this was built in 1902, and this building was built in 1911. So we figured if you have cool old buildings, they need their own bottles. And what better way to do that than make some train station? So we wanted to differentiate the two. Nice.
Oh, look
we
at
do
that.
have more. We have more olive pesto. I love it. Mom made them too. She got the right stuff this time. So we wanted to differentiate between the Cote Bonneville wines and the train station wines. So the Cote wines are very classic. They're traditional. They have a lot of history. There's a lot of pedigree behind the way they're made. The blends are very intentional with the Cab, the Bordeaux varietals going to Bordeaux blends, the Syrah goes into the Syrah, and those two don't get blended together. Whereas train station is emblematic of what makes Washington so fun. It's dynamic, it's innovative, it's very creative, and we can do things in a way that you can't necessarily do in parts of the world where they have more regulatory constrictions. So the concept, we started with the Cabernet Sauvignon, which is what we have here. It's single varietal, which is a much more new world concept. It's about the variety as opposed to about the place that it's from. It's also one of the things we wanted to differentiate. We had people come into the tasting room and somebody actually told me, she goes, I love your wines, but I don't share them. She says, I don't have any friends as special as your wine. And I'm like, nice.
They need to find you.
And I'm like, well, that's really, that is such a lovely sentiment, but that's kind of sad because, honey, you need new friends. As part of my, then again, I have friends who don't appreciate this. They don't want to, and they don't really want to drink it. I don't always want to drink it on a Tuesday night when I want one bottle of wine or one bottle. Now I sound like a drish. When I only want one glass of wine.
What's wrong with Tuesday night?
Well, sometimes that's what train station's for. And it's one of those that you can drink with, you can share it with your friends and not feel guilty about it. It's got this wonderful screw cap. So you open it up, you pour yourself a glass, you put the screw cap back on, you lie to yourself and tell yourself you're not going to have another glass, but it's approachable and easy. And, hi, Becky. And that's one of those things it's really a nice addition to what we do. It rounds things out. It also enables us to be more dynamic and innovative and keep playing with things because the Cote wines being so traditional, in a lot of ways, they're very similar year in and year out and year in and year out in what we're doing. And so the chance to play is really kind of fun in that that's how we're making the Cab Franc, for example, that we're coming out with this fall, that we can do it once. We can, it's not such a commitment, so it's easier to experiment and do fun things. So that's been a really nice addition to the wines that we make for us. So the other thing that's cool about the train station is that it was when the building itself is really cool and has a lot of history. And I should let Mom talk about this because you were there for more of it.
Yeah, not all of it, but more of it. So when we came to Sunnyside, Hugh needed an office building, and there wasn't a lot, as you might imagine, in Sunnyside in those days. So we bought a lot, and we were going to build a building. And then we got a note on our car windshield one day that said, I got a really cool idea for your building. Come talk to me. So we did, and it was kind of a friend and a fellow who owned a business in town. And he took us down to Grandview and showed us this old abandoned train station. And of course it was a mess, but I thought it was a beautiful building. It has beautiful lines. We came from the Midwest. We kind of like older things. And so we said, well, yeah, but how do we get it to Sunnyside? And they said, well, you just move it. And I thought, okay. So fortunately, we were really young in those days, and that's what we did. We picked it up and we moved it to Sunnyside. And I'm sure all the neighbors thought we had lost our marbles because it didn't look very good after you move it, let me just say. And it had been abandoned since the 40s. So initially, the railroads were very important to this area because they opened up the lower valley to commerce, to goods, and to also to people. And this was the gathering place for Grandview, for the community. So we kind of thought that was neat, especially now that it's kind of reverted back to sort of a gathering place. But anyways, I digress. But we moved it to Sunnyside. We remodeled it the first time, and Hugh practiced in it for
and
a long time.
The train tracks at the bottom are the train tracks that got put in brick in the sidewalk. Since it's not actively on the tracks anymore, we still have the tracks. And it was pretty funny about, I don't know, the beginning of March, seems like ages ago, but pre-corona, my neighbor came down with her kids, and the kids were, the 4-year-old was running up and down the tracks around the building because that was so fun. And I had to laugh because, I mean, we did that when we were kids.
All kids have done that for
oh yeah, the entire town has run around the tracks around the building. So it's kind of fun. And then the train on here is Sagebrush Annie. Sagebrush Annie was the first train to come into the station back at the beginning. So there's some of the history of the building is on here. And the cool thing about the building and the people running around the train tracks and the trains coming in is that when we opened it up, well, actually, even when it was a medical practice, people from the community would come in and bring pictures of it from different points in time when it was in. Nice! Ed's got it on his background, moving down the.
Yeah, there it is.
moving down
the street.
Yeah. So, but people brought us all these pictures from the 50s, from the early 1900s, of how this building was such an important part of the community and such an important part of the town. And it really seems like it's full circle because.
Yeah, well, even when we were remodeling it the second time, we had people just show up. One lady came with her scrapbook and she said, do you mind if I come in and talk to you? And we said, no, it happens, come on in. Her grandfather was the first train master of the building, and he was 12 years old. 12. And she had pictures of him, and she had pictures of the trains. It was pretty cool.
But they used to make, when he was 12, that he used to manage the station and be the station master, and then he would walk the tracks to make sure there were no issues on the tracks. And he would walk like 20 miles a day or something like that. He like walks just up and down monitoring the tracks and did all the stuff at 12. So apparently child labor laws were a little different 100 years ago.
And then we had other people who came in and brought us, we have all kinds, I think we have all the memorabilia of that train station that exists because people just show up and say it should stay with the building, which we're graciously happy to do. And like I said, we love the building. It's very welcoming. It's great gathering place, and so we felt that it would be fun to make a wine that reflected that that you want to enjoy with your friends and have happy hour around.
Yeah, and added bonus is that the trains connected this area to the outside world, because before this time, if you lived in the Lower Valley, you couldn't get anywhere other than horses and stagecoaches, so it took a long time to go someplace. And so it's really fun that, especially with this kind of thing, we're connecting people from all over the country to a happy hour together, which and all over the continent. Tony, we have to give you a shout out.
Yep.
And
so one thing, these train stations were brought out by the railroad and assembled in place. So a little bit like the Sears catalog houses of the era. And so they all looked alike. They were up and down the line from Walla Walla to Yakima. And this is the only one that still exists. It's not in the same location, but it's the only building that all the rest have been torn down.
And Union Pacific was going to tear it down when Mom and Dad bought it because they wanted the land. They were just taking up space on the.
Yeah, and it was a liability, but so we saved it. It was fun. We enjoy it. We hope you do too.
Yeah. So I'm gonna try. Now, the first time Mom made these things, she didn't have any of the puff pastry, so she made them with phyllo. And so, as we said in the email, substitutions are allowed. Creativity is encouraged this time of year.
You have to get what you can get in Sunnyside during a pandemic, but.
So, I'm really impressed with how many people made the mushrooms last week. Becky, did you make the pesto?
Of course.
Yes.
Good. Pretty easy, isn't it?
Oh, it was super easy. I made the
Yeah.
pesto at lunchtime, and then we put it all together right before this.
Which is perfect, because if you guys don't realize how little Becky, not to throw you under the bus, how little Becky cooked like spontaneously before this, I am so proud. I am very proud. So,
But now Harvey, on the other hand, I'll let Harvey speak.
yeah.
Harvey is a good cook.
Okay, I'm-
No, wait, we got you.
Now we got you.
So Harvey's going to be our guest chef for one of our wines. We're letting him, he can't quite figure out how you do a virtual guest chef. So we're here to show you.
Okay.
And if you're drinking Chardonnay, Chardonnay's next week. So,
Yeah, well, I'm sorry I jumped the gun.
Mhm.
It's really good, though.
what vintage do you have?
2011.
Oh, I hope it's
So,
It's delicious.
good.
It's holding up really well.
Adrish, I think this is your cue to talk about what wine you have open right now.
I'm drinking a 2011 Carriage House. Oh, that doesn't show up very well. There we go. It is. I would agree. It is a beautiful vintage. I made like pork tacos earlier for dinner, and it paired phenomenally well.
Mm.
So since last week, well, we got the text about at 4:30 our time that Adrish was drinking the 2011, which is why I know that. But we had this conversation last week. Since June, what did you open the 13 and then tasted the 14?
Yes, I did last week.
Okay. Well, so Adrish, do you want to give your opinions on the 11? Since I think June also asked me about the 10, which was a very similar vintage to 11.
I mean, all I can say is it is a delicious wine. Like I didn't have to aerate it. It tasted great right out of the bottle. It didn't feel as sort of full and full and full bodied as sort of like a cab usually would be. But I'm a fan. I prefer it to the 12 and the 13, which I had like earlier this week, I think, or last week.
For educational purposes only. Right?
Always. It's called research.
Someone's got to do it.
Yeah. Harvey, do you have any thoughts on the 11 vintage of Carriage House?
It's not Carriage House. It's the good stuff.
Okay.
Well, let's say the
Thoughts on the
best
11
stuff.
Chardonnay?
It's your 2011 Chardonnay, Cote Bonneville, and yeah, it's I poured a little for me and for my wife Carol, who's sitting in the other room, and you said, "What is this? This is delicious." So it's a hit,
That's all you need to say.
and and from a food standpoint, I just was roasting some asparagus, and I made a kind of tonnato sauce. Tuna pureed with olive oil and a little bit of mayonnaise and lemon juice. I'm going to put some of that on the asparagus, and we'll see how that goes.
Oh, now that sounds really good.
We can possibly do that for a future.
There you go. See?
Yeah.
You're on the spot.
And we're getting asparagus tomorrow.
Mm-hmm. We're getting a flat tomorrow.
So we have
We're in
to.
the asparagus capital of the Northwest.
Yes.
Exactly. So Mom's gonna go get a flat from the field because
Okay.
that's
That's the way we roll
That's the
around
way
here.
to do it.
Co's gonna have some of it. And so there's Aaron. What's Aaron drinking tonight?
Do you have to unmute you?
Yeah.
There we go.
I haven't actually opened anything up. I just got back from work. So I just got back from work and went through the whole sterilization process. So hop on and say hi very quickly.
Well, I hate to see him keeping Reby and thirsty. That's not acceptable.
Well, that's why I need to leave, because I need to go get wine for my wife.
There you go.
Fair
We
enough.
have our priorities straight in this house.
You better go now.
I'm gonna go find something. I'll be back.
Awesome. So,
I know Jim has it.
yep. So actually, we should, because Dad at some point is going to have to go change out water. So we should, before it gets too late, do our vineyard update. And Dad, I have your pictures, and I have a picture. So I have a picture from last week of the
vine.
but I think that was, did you show Syrah or Cabernet last week?
Is he muted?
Oh, wait, let me unmute you, Dad. Hold on. Wait. Okay, now you can talk.
That's the Syrah. I did both last week. Marshall commented and Jonathan did about the cab, but I took this particular group of shoots to show what the vine was doing with the burst of energy after bud break. And then if you want to show this week, just 1 week later, what it looks like.
Yeah, it's pretty dramatic.
Oh,
Oh,
wow.
I think that's the cab.
Well, hold on. I got a lot of
stuff.
There's still a lot going on.
I got a lot of stuff open. Is it that one?
That's a dramatically different, for those of you who haven't had a chance to track what's going on in the vineyard on a week-to-week basis, this is the jump that has occurred in the past week. And there's a whole lot going on here. We're going to show you next week what this looks like again. And then the week after that, you're going to see how we prune it back to the working shoots that are going to be there, the step we call shoot thinning. And so you'll see the two shoots that we're going to use to come along, and also regeneration shoots that are coming off of the cordon. And this year we have a lot of regeneration shoots, so that's real exciting as well. It's been a little bit cool in the vineyard. We're about a week behind. And as the shoots get bigger, we start our mildew program to spray every 2 weeks to keep the mildew from affecting anything that's going on. We change the agents on a regular basis, but we always start with sulfur, and that's pretty much around the world what you'll see at the beginning of a spray program. So,
Well, and I think the other thing
how
that's,
things go from week to week.
I think
And if
the
you
other
have
thing,
any questions, give us a holler.
I think the thing that's really notable about how fast everything's growing right now is one of the challenges that we can have during the spring is if we have a cool spring and things grow really slowly, there's potential for cutworms to come up and like they actually eat the middle of the buds because they like that baby tissue. But once the shoots are at this level of growth, we're already past that because it went, I mean, you guys have been following along every week. We were talking, there's nothing going on. There's nothing going on. There's a little bit going on. There's a little bit, and then boom. And it's been, because our weather was pretty cool. And then all of a sudden it's been in the 70s and everything's grown right through that first vulnerable stage, which is really fantastic because it's the best way, since it's Earth Day, the best way to grow sustainably is to live in a sustainable environment. And the Yakima Valley is sustainable by nature. We don't have the disease pressure. We don't have the pest pressure that they do in a lot of areas. So even though there are some threats, it's really a wonderful place that we can grow things with. So much of our pest and disease management can be done through sunlight, through airflow, through just like, I mean, social distancing. You want those clusters to have their space, have their airflow, not be too close to their leafy friends, and then everybody gets along and everybody's safe and healthy. So, all right, what kind of questions do we have this week? We are not biodynamic because, well, given the current situation, I mean, do you go to the hospital when you need to? Do you go to the hospital every day, or do you go to the hospital when you need to? Do you want antibiotics do you take them every morning with your vitamins, or do you take them when you're really sick? If you get really sick, you want those options and those things available to you versus saying, no, we're not going to do any of those kinds of things. I mean, it's just because you have all the tools in your toolkit doesn't mean that you have to use them all the time. And so we are not certified biodynamic, we're not certified organic, but we do a lot of very sustainable practices. We actually let our sustainability certification lapse because they didn't have best practices for our environment in their certification at that time. Because I mean, you can make a checklist of what are the right things to do. And I mean, there are parts of the country right now or parts of the world where you're not allowed to leave your house. Well, in Sunnyside, leaving your house, the risk of walking out your front door is very different than the risk of walking out your front door in Manhattan, because there's just not as many people close to. I can socially distance in a much greater area of my house than you can if you live in Manhattan, just because of the virtue of where I live. So what's sustainable, what's healthy, what's good practice changes depending on where you live. Things like mildew changes dramatically if you're in a region where it rains all the time versus if you're in the semi-desert like here. I mean, you can see in Paul's picture, which I love that you're illustrating my point for me. The vines are nice and green. Nope, go back, zoom out. Let's see underneath. But underneath the vines, nothing grows because it's so dry that we don't have the level of weeds and, I mean, stuff doesn't grow here.
And we don't have humidity.
We don't have the humidity that fosters all that growth. We can keep our canopies small, which keeps the humidity down, which really protects from molds and mildews and
You get better airflow.
You get better airflow. And so
Sunlight.
if you write your standards for a place that is very different, they're not necessarily the things that are going to work. I mean, if you write it for Bordeaux, where it's cool and they can't irrigate, and then you take those standards and you apply them to Oregon, where it's cool and you don't need to irrigate, and then you bring them up to Washington, where it's warmer and drier, the best practices in one place for sustainability are not the best practices in another. And so by not being certified, it actually gives us more license to be innovative, to be at the forefront. Because whenever new technologies come out and new solutions come out, does that mean they're allowed in the rules right away? Not necessarily. So we can actually do more research, we can be more innovative, and we can be more on the forefront by not being certified than we could if we were certified. So where does the rest of the fruit from the vineyard go, Scott? Oh, so we get about a quarter of it, and who gets the rest? We have Owen Rowe, pursued by Baird, Dalil, Betts, Rasa, Kevin White, Dad, Papiano. Who else gets fruit from us?
Oh,
Pomeroy.
Marie.
Valdemar. I gotta go around the vineyard. It's hard for me to do this off the top of my head. But there's about a dozen-ish. Dad manages that. He's supposed to know the answer to this question. But there's about a dozen wineries that get fruit from the vineyard. A lot of them get vineyard designated, not everything anymore. There have always been, I mean, like Dalil puts it in their higher end, I forget what bottle.
Schiller Estates.
Put it in Schiller Estates. Betts puts it in one of their, I forget which one, but it goes into the top tier wines and not so much vineyard designation per se. But then we've got people like Kyle McLaughlin and Pursued by Bear who we're trying to work with him to get him enough fruit so he can vineyard designate. There are 45 acres that are total that are planted. Those hillside vines do get about 2 tons per acre. We get a little more in the carriage house block. And the train station cab comes from both. It's not site specific. Like Coat comes from the hillside, carriage house comes from that lower block. Train station is a barrel selection. It includes those rows that were behind Paul at the beginning, but it also includes some other various parts around the vineyard. The blend changes every year. It's much more dynamic than Coat and Carriage House because we're looking more for approachability and general deliciousness than expressing a sense of place specifically. So the blend changes depending on the vintage, and so the roads do too.
You're still going to have that pretty classic cherry de Brule or de Brule cherry. I think you can tell it's de Brule fruit. Obviously, it's just not as site specific as the others.
It's only vineyard designated. It's
Yeah.
not block designated. It's only vineyard designated. We don't sell to Hogue anymore. We used to, but since Hogue lost their wonderful director of winemaking,
Who's present today?
yes, he is. And Co, what are you drinking right now? I'll unmute you so your hands are free.
Oh, thanks. Well, since I opened up about half a dozen bottles today, I'm unfortunately not drinking Train Station, but I'm having a nice bottle of 15 Snipes Mountain Syrah from Rosscamp.
Nice.
Yummy.
And we zipped down to taste, and
We were socially distant.
We had good practices. And I got to say that we tasted some of the 13 Chardonnay, some older Chardonnay, and
We'll be revisiting.
Yummy.
It was really nice.
Before next week.
So when Co said, "Do you want to take a bottle with you?" we said, "Yeah, we'll take that 13 Chardonnay." So
There's 12 cases left, so it's going fast. Call me.
Fortunately, we don't have any of the 11 Chardonnay left. So Harvey, you're gonna have to enjoy that bottle.
I am intending to do so.
Wonderful.
We're getting some takeout from a wonderful Sardinian restaurant, which is close to where we live, called La Chicha, for dinner tonight. And I'm anticipating that this is going to be very good with their spaghetti with botarga.
You're
Sorry
making
to
my
make
little,
everyone drool, but that's.
Well, it's, I'm glad to see all of the restaurants having those kinds of things for takeout because it supports all the small businesses and the restaurants, and we definitely want them to stick around. And B, if you're going to be stuck at home, you might as well be eating well and drinking well.
Well, is that what people are doing at home?
I don't know what else you'd be doing.
Well, nothing.
I think this crew is probably eating and drinking well.
Yes.
Oh, guess who's back? What'd you bring, Aaron? What'd you get?
Hold on, we gotta unmute him.
Oh, what did I get from?
Aaron
Aaron.
Snyderman, Aaron, back.
That doesn't work. It is Rhiannon. It's a long story. Rhiannon loves Mueller-Thurgau, so it is a bottle of
I don't love
Mueller-Thurgau.
Italian.
She loves Italian Mueller-Thurgau.
Good.
It is Kettmeyer. Little Alto Adige Mueller-Thurgau, which is nothing like anything that you make whatsoever at all, but it was there and she wanted some. So that's what we did.
That's okay.
Well, because last time I said, "Do you want me to bring you some rosé?" You're like, "Well, wait till you come next week," and then next week never happened. So
It never happened. Yeah.
I have to go down to Gus's house and raid the cellar.
Your world, you tell me.
Because he's always stocked.
Yes, and we are still shipping, to Adrisha's point. So we will get you more because he's out of wine.
Well,
We're getting out of wine. And we don't want anybody getting thirsty at this point in time. That would be horrible.
No thirsty. Thirsty is bad.
So, oh, and Micah joined us.
Hey, Micah.
Nice to see you. So, all right, what kind of questions do we have? Anybody? You guys are disappointing me today.
Train station. I believe it or not, I'm fairly unfamiliar with that bottling.
Uh-huh.
Is that a state fruit?
Yes.
That's all we do.
So one of the reasons we don't want to bring other grapes into the winery is that our grapes are really clean. And because the wine, so many of our wines are unfined and unfiltered, we really want to make sure that we don't bring grapes from other places that could bring, I mean, if you have clean fruit, you're starting your microbial environment well. If you're bringing in compromised fruit, you're not. And I actually had somebody from Red Mountain try to sell me fruit a couple years ago, and I'm like, but we're in a state winery. He's like, but I'd really like to see what you could do with our fruit. And I said, well, that's really sweet, but I'd have to change the label and the logo and everything. I mean, everything's estate bottled. It says it right on there. So, you know, it's, what it does, Erin, is it gives us a way to, for people who say, I don't want to share your wines, I don't want to drink. There are so many people who say, I don't drink your wines. I go down to my cellar and I pet them. I just look at them and I pet them.
Yeah.
And they make me happy because I go down there and I just look at them. I go, oh, that's a really special bottle. I'm like, well, we make them for you to drink too. I mean, I'm glad they make you happy, however they make you happy, but I will make more. We make more every year. You should share them with your friends. The worst thing ever is to have those bottles that like you want to share. My friends come over who don't drink a lot of wine and they don't necessarily want to drink Coke, but I don't want to drink the stuff that they drink. And Train Station's a perfect happy medium for that. So it's a great.
Carrie converted me.
There we go. Tell us the story.
I mean, that's basically the story. I'd come and visit you, and you're like, let's drink this. Let's open up some Coke. I'm like, we're not fancy enough to drink Coke. And you're like, just wait.
And now she is.
You have to earn it.
So, I mean,
we're from California.
Hmm?
I don't want to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
Go for it.
Jump in.
And we're friends with Barbara Clover, so she sent us your wine, and we're very close to Napa Valley, and we're close to Paso Robles. But this wine is awesome. So I'm wondering if you sell out of state.
We do. We have distribution, although right now, because we're small and we only have 45 acres total, and we only keep about a quarter of that to ourselves. You can go to your local wine shop and ask for it. Or we can, right now, the easiest thing might be to ship direct. Because I don't know, or if you've got a small local wine shop that you want to support, ask them for it. So we're all about supporting the other small wine shops.
We do have
in California. This is really, really good. Very, very. I like a smooth finish, and this was very good.
Great, wonderful. And we love that people are sharing. So Barb, thanks for spreading the word and inviting people. That's fantastic. I mean, that's one of the things that is really cool right now with normally how people discover the wines is either they go to restaurants and sommeliers like Erin introduced them, or they come through our tasting room. And because those things are shut down, it's really great when people are giving recommendations. So thank you. Yeah, we do. To Paul, to your point, that we feel that all of the wines are a great value. I think the Spectator called Carriage House a value wine a long, long time ago, and we've never changed the price. But Train Station is, for an estate, for a vineyard, for a De Brule Vineyard Cabernet, we think it's a wine of this quality. We think, sorry, you gotta move. I gotta move. Nugget wants to say something. And my chair rolls, and Nugget sleeps under the desk, and whenever Nugget wants to get in or out, I move.
Which means I move.
Yeah. Because Nugget is, for those of you who haven't met Nugget, come here. Hey, come here.
He's shy.
Nugget, come here. Hey, come here. Nugget's big.
Come here, Nugget.
He's not a little dog. I don't believe in little dogs. Nugget this is Nugget.
Oh. Say hi to the folks. Say hi to Milo.
Nugget got named, he's not Nugget because he's little. He got named Nugget after a hop varietal because we grow world-class grapes and wonderful asparagus, but we also grow, it's one of the best regions, if not the best region in the world to grow hops. And my dog drinks beer. He loves beer. If you put your wine on a coffee table, he knows he has enough self-restraint to not drink it, although he likes wine. But if you put your pint glass on a low coffee table, it's gonna be gone. He has no self-restraint with beer. So he got named after a hop varietal.
And since he's a rescue, he didn't have the best manners when we first got him, so he would knock me over all the time and drink my beer. That was really annoying. He doesn't knock me over anymore as much.
No,
not on purpose.
Although, Ed, to your point that he's the size of a small cattle, he's also black and white like a cow. And so my niece and I have been doing riddles every day. And all the riddles that were like, what's black and white and whatever, that would be a cow or a zebra, they've all turned into what's black and white and blue. It's a sad nugget. And so Nugget's turned into all the jokes. He's the daily riddle.
He's the daily riddle.
So anybody who has any great riddles, send them over. I need one every day.
So what's Dan drinking? He's not a train station kind of guy.
Wait. Let me unmute you. Okay, go ahead. What are you drinking, Dan?
You don't want to know, but it's a Pinot Noir.
Oh, damn.
We had a
hurting. Ouch.
dinner.
Mom's version of a lighter red is rosé.
Okay, mute. Jim drinking. How's Jim?
Hold on, I gotta get over there.
You could try you,
Gary?
Isn't that a blush?
Huh?
Isn't that a blush or rosé?
Rosé. No, we
Pinot
make
Noir.
It's rosé. I mean, it kind of depends on how you make them. I think of blush as red wine and white wine mixed, giving you pink wine. Whereas rosé is either a Saignée or something that goes direct press. I don't know, Harvey, you can tell me if I'm right or wrong on that. But
everybody has a different definition, but you know, the original blush wine was essentially a Saignée. It was what it's what they took off of. It was the original white blush was white Zinfandel, and that was back in the 1970s, and it was basically the Saignée that they took off of the Zinfandel to make the red Zinfandel richer.
Oh.
But you know, definitions change.
Right.
Well, I think blush is one of those there's a lot of words in the.
It's a light rosé.
Yeah, rosé realm that are changing. So, all right, Micah, what are you drinking tonight? Let me unmute you. How you doing?
I've got a train station. I have no idea what year, but it was at the top of the stack, so I'm guessing it was the newest one.
That works.
I like the top of the stack. That's
I like petting them too, but I like drinking them better.
Huh?
I like petting them too, but I like drinking them better.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, agreed.
There you go. And to Aaron's question of why train station, it's for the wines that you just grab the one at the top of the stack.
Yep. You got to keep them handy that once you're going to drink.
Yep. So,
okay, so I think this is Jim's first train station. So
Yes, Carrie.
Yes.
I'm here with my wife, Anna. This is our first time participating, and thank you very much. And we're drinking a 2016 train station that Kathy brought me yesterday, and your pizza is terrific. We just love it. I've got a question for you, though.
Uh-huh.
I saw the kind of the brochure that you had that had all your wine spectator scores on it and so on and so forth. They had the various years.
Maybe say thanks to Barbara for that.
How long do you age those wines before you actually put them into the profile so you get the score?
Well, we have, it kind of depends actually on the reviewer. I would say in general, there's a pattern. So the advocate, for example, likes to taste the latest and greatest and barrel samples. And we resisted that for a while because if you make wines, like Train Station, we make it to drink young. Carriage House, we make it to drink at 2011. We make it to drink at 10 years old, or as Aaron pointed out a couple weeks ago, we're selling ourselves short by saying drink it at 10 years old. He thinks Carriage House is easily a 20, 30-year wine. But then that means you'd never drink Cote. So those wines we intend to age a lot longer. So we tried to release them to reviewers a little bit later. And which can make it hard because you're not comparing apples to apples if you go through everything and you're tasting young wines and then older wines. So depending on who's reviewing, we have either said, okay, we'll give you the barrel samples that you're asking for, or like with Harvey, we said, you understand the wines, so we'll give them to you when they're a little bit more ready. So the Spectator's actually behind the Advocate, I think, by a year or two. So it kind of depends.
You have to realize that when we started making wines, we were very focused on what our mission was. And we wanted to make very classically styled, world-class wines that would compare to the best wines of the world. So doing that, you make a wine that's going to develop in time. And that's a little bit of a crazy talk for a small winery in Sunnyside. So
20 years ago, for sure.
For sure.
Now it's not. Now
Yeah.
it's not because everybody in Sunnyside's drinking Kool-Aid.
Yeah, but it was a little bit over the top. And people were like, they didn't understand who we were and how my question I got oftentimes was, who do you think you are? And so it became apparent that if we're in this for the long haul, that time is going to just be on our side. And we actually didn't release wines to critics because, again, if they don't really understand what you're trying to do, which was a little bit different than what most people were doing at that time in Washington State, for sure. It was just, we just didn't go there. And then we were very fortunate that Harry Steinman called me up one day and wanted to taste the wines. And after that, the Advocate came and wanted to taste the wines. And after that, they just kept coming, enthusiasts. And so people began to understand what we were trying to do. We were in it for the long run. We were committed to doing what we were doing. We sold fruit to a lot of people who said, I'm going to do this. And within several years, they didn't do anything near that. I mean, that's class. A lot of people get into this business saying, I want to do this. We did what we wanted to do. We're still doing what we intended to do at the beginning. That's not easy to do. And it's not usually the norm at all.
So, it's really easy to be like, ooh, what, there's a bright, shiny object like Malbec. Are you going to start making Malbec? It's like, well, we don't grow Malbec. And then there's another one, ooh, there's a bright shiny object this region. And ooh, there's a bright shiny object this grape. And actually it's in many ways, it's very, it constrains us, but it gives us a lot of focus to have that very defined purpose of we make wines from our vineyard that have a sense of place, that are classically styled. And that's where the train station is actually a real anomaly in that it needs its own label to be something creative and dynamic and new, because our vision was so new at the time. 20 years ago, people didn't do any of those things in
It was
Washington
actually an
State.
old vision, but it was new to the times. I mean, it's really what the industry's been doing in other countries forever. It just wasn't what was done here as much, because quite frankly, it's kind of expensive.
It's very expensive.
You have to start with a vineyard that really is distinctive and can stand alone. And a lot of people said, you can't do that in Washington because that can't happen. And we said, well, we think it can. So we bucked the trend a lot in those early years. And then we made Bordeaux blends. Who made Bordeaux blends in 2001? Nobody made Bordeaux blends. DeLille was the only other person.
Bordeaux blends in 2001 were where you put the wines that didn't fit your other programs. So
Yeah.
if it wasn't good enough to go into your Cabernet, it went into your blend. Except some of the most highly acclaimed wines in the world, like everything that comes out of Bordeaux, for example, are blends, because
it's much more about the estate than the place.
Yeah, it's about the sense of place versus about the winemaking or the grape or any of those other things. And so did we originally grow grapes to make wine that you wanted to drink? Oh, that's funny, because so Mom said for years and years and years, because when they planted the vineyard, well, you must have planted the vineyard when I was in middle school, because I think I made my first wine the same year they planted the vineyard, and which I was in 7th grade. And so they, for years, we're not starting a winery. We're not starting a winery. We're not starting a winery. We're never starting a winery. And my senior year of college, we all we were at a restaurant or something, and they're like, we have something to tell you, but you might want to sit down first. And we're like, what, are you starting a winery? And they're like, yep. And
well, the kids left home. We had the empty nest syndrome. It was really bad. I mean, what are you going to do, right?
I mean, this is actually while we're drinking Train Station is it's the perfect wine to illustrate this, because unlike so many winemakers or wineries in Washington State who say, I'm a fancy winemaker, I'm going to start a brand. Let me go find some grapes. Well, let me buy some wine, buy some bulk wine because I need to get started for cash flow. And then let me buy some bulk wine or have somebody else make my wine. And then I'm going to open a tasting room, and then maybe I'll make more of the wine, and then I'm going to maybe I'll grow some grapes. And it kind of evolves the other way. We were all about the grapes, and then the grapes established themselves, and Mom and Dad said, we have something really special here. We need to take it to the next level and do our own thing. And then we had the winery, and they said, well, nobody's ever going to come visit us, because who wants to come visit a winery? And people would come, they'd come down the gravel road and find what some people think is a shed, even though it's a really nice winery. It's one of the easiest places to work in and clean, and it's incredibly functional of any place I've ever worked, which is really important for what we're trying to do, but it doesn't look fancy. And we said, who wants to come here? And people kept wanting to come here. And so then 15 years after, we started the Train Station. And it's completely the opposite of how most wineries evolve, it makes sense then that our vision is very different than what most people are trying to do. And the whole point of the wines is that they're distinctive and unique and special. And you can't do that if you have the same vision and the same grapes and the same everything as everybody else, which I think that's one of the things that's really cool about Côte Bonneville, is that we don't just make wine. the goal was never to just make wine. We make wines that are distinctive and have a sense of place and are special. And
I can tell you the other night I'm not sure, didn't we have a celebration? Anyways, we decided to open an older coat, and I happened to have an 02, so I said, well, let's have this. And so I decanted it, because I thought, well, it's kind of old, might have a little bit of sediment, did a little bit, not much. But, and then I let it in the decanter, and it was probably hour and a half before we had dinner.
it wasn't a celebration because you didn't tell me about it. You were just drinking.
Oh, we were just drinking, but whatever. It's always a celebration when you have an 02 coat. But that wine was phenomenal, but it was even better after about,
that says 4 hours.
4 hours as time went on. And I said, oh, I should have decanted this even earlier. He said, well, you should have double decanted it. I said, well, yeah, I didn't think about that with a 18-year-old, well, it was 18-year-old wine. But it was just amazing. So it's pretty fun, pretty special to have wines like that in our stable.
Because I mean, in 2002, the other thing that's kind of special is that most people about Côte Bonneville is that most people didn't make wines that were intended to age for 20 years in Washington State. I mean, the industry was so young. People, I mean, most of the wineries that are around today didn't exist in 2002. And the ones that did were experimenting and still figuring stuff out. And I mean, there were the exceptions, but the concept of making age-worthy wines out of Yakima, or out of Washington, but at that time pretty much out of the Yakima Valley, was still pretty much a new concept. So
basically the way wines were made, you were either one of the few big wineries, which were at the time Hogue, obviously Saint Michel, and you can't compete with them as a small winery. I mean, there's no way you can come out with a $6.99 bottle of wine on a grocery store. It's just impossible. So or there were the people who were buying grapes, making wine, and selling out of their tasting rooms every weekend. And I just said, that's not happening for me. So we said, in order to do what we want to do, this is what we want to do. And if we don't make it, we're just not going to make wine. We'll just grow grapes. There's just no point in trying to make wines that are not more generic. I mean, the big guys can do that so well. Why that it just isn't something we can do.
And if you can make exceptional wines, you should, because most vineyards, by definition, most vineyards are average. I mean, the definition of average is the middle 50% is average, and these guys are below, and these guys are above average. But exceptional is more than one standard deviation away from the norm. Exceptional is if you have your bell-shaped curve. Exceptional is over off the screen, over here. And our vineyard's over here. And so in a way, we're selling the land short, the vine short, and all the work in the vineyard short if we just make average wines. It's our obligation, in a way, to make exceptional wines, because that's the vineyard that's the site that we have, and not everybody can. So we should. I mean, it's kind of a responsibility. So what do we do now versus 20 years ago that makes the wines better? Well, a lot of it goes back to the vineyard. I think the winemaking is not fancy in a way, in that the winemaking is exceptionally about, if you have really good grapes and you take care of the fundamentals and you execute very, very well, you will take those grapes and turn them into something that you're intending to do. We don't do a lot of fancy concrete's the latest and greatest, or I mean, I don't even know what's the latest and greatest this year, but we don't we don't play around with foudres. We don't play around with concrete. There's a lot of microbial issues that could be introduced, and that would take away from the unfined, unfiltered. Winemaking is all about expressing the sense of place, but so many of the decisions in winemaking are microscopic details. And I think the more you work with your site and the more experience you have with your site and how they evolve, and the barrels, which is why we wanted to have Manny here, because everybody had questions about barrels. I think we lost Manny, but and we're losing Dad. Dad says bye. Dad's got to go do water. No? Hold on. Let me unmute you.
Doesn't know where's the
What?
She loves to mute me. But anyway, what we're doing differently is when you came, we had started with the carriage house and the coat, and then we added the Chardonnay. But then when you came on board, we added the Riesling, we added the Rosé, we added the Syrah, you did the late harvest Riesling, and then the train station. And so the question is, when Mom and I were doing the grunt work in there, and then when you came, you took it up several levels. So, and the range of wines that we were able to do. And so that's one of the things that the folks that weren't around in the early years might not have known. You made a big difference.
Well, thanks. I think the bigger difference, I mean, thank you. I appreciate that. But I think and I'm going to unmute you. I'm going to mute you again. I think, though, to answer the question of what makes the wines better over time is that we have consistently been focused on that same attention to detail and minutia in the vineyard. And we've done an amazing amount of research. We've worked with WSU and Kevin Pogue down at Walla Walla for years to do research to really hone in where are those spots, how do we get everything dialed in so perfectly so that we execute extremely well in the vineyard and in the winery. And as we continue to learn more, Washington State does more research than any other region for the size of the industry in the world, I think. Maybe Australia, but they're a much bigger area than we are. I mean, when I wrote my thesis, the number of papers that I cited that came out of Washington was almost the same. And I had a 7-page bibliography. I read a lot of research, but I cited almost as many papers out of Washington as I did out of California, because we do that much more research here. And so much of it is viticulture based, and so much of it is directly related to it's very practical. I sit on some grant proposal committees where I'm reading grants to look at what people are doing in other industries. And I think it's what we do in apples and peaches and pears and potatoes. And I mean, I've read papers on onions where they're dealing with similar pest issues that we're dealing with in grapes. And although the solutions are different, plant biology is the same. And so the fact that that we have such diversified agriculture means you get all of that cross-pollination of research and dissemination of things. And so, I mean, it's one thing to say we learn from what they're doing in California. It's another thing to say, you know what, we're learning from what they do in California, and we're learning from what they do in Australia, and we're learning from what they do in France, but we're also learning from what they do in apples in our region. And we're also learning from the pests and disease issues they have in pears. And it's really, this dynamic agricultural perspective really gives that breadth that you can take ideas from other places and bring them back to what we're doing. And so when we get better in the vineyard, the wines get better. Harvey, do you have a thought?
About that?
when they're yellow like this, I thought.
I'm following what you're saying very closely, and it's interesting to me. I think what I saw in Washington was a willingness to figure out just why things happen the way they do in this place, where nothing grows like it does anywhere else. I mean, you're basically in a desert, a little less so in Yakima Valley, but most of Eastern Washington is basically a desert. Australia has similar kinds of places, which may be why you see a lot of kind of research there. But everyone's trying to figure out what's going to work, what's going to make the best quality. And it's all quality oriented because, with the exception of some big wineries that can work on scale, you have to sell on quality. You can't just make a lot of wine and hope that people are going to line up to buy it because of marketing. And what got me excited about Washington was that everybody was really hunkering down and trying to figure out, how does this work to make this as much as we want it to be, as good as we want it to be. And there's a lot of ways to do that. People in Walla Walla do things a little differently than people where you are, and looking at new places to grow grapes all over the state has been another trend. But as far as the trajectory over the last 20 years, if that's what you want me to talk about, I think it's just a matter of people figuring out the details and learning what it takes to get the most out of what you have.
Yep.
So Ed has a question about why do European wines appear to age longer than American? You can.
I don't think that's true.
Oh,
go ahead.
You got it first. You got the floor.
Well, I mean, look, there are very specific wines in the greatest regions that have been doing it for the longest time. Yes, those wines can age for a century. We've seen that happen in Bordeaux, Burgundy, Germany, Italy, but that's only a very thin layer at the very top. If you look at most European wine is consumed within the vintage, within 1 or 2 years, and that's the same almost everywhere in the world. It's you got to compare apples to apples. Who's really in a lucky spot with their vineyards in a lucky spot and is able to make the best of it. And that's a really small slice out of the top of what's going on in the world. And it's what gets us all excited.
Co might want to talk on that too.
Cody, you have any thoughts on that? You've been making wine here for 25 years?
Let's see if I can unmute. Well, you know, what's so intriguing about this area is that it was one of the it is a world-class area in terms of climate and soils, and in terms of what the potential is here. It's incredible, and it was very untapped until about 40 years ago, and people started realizing this and moving up here and working with it. And we had pioneers, and we had people who moved into this area. But every great wine growing region in the world has taken decades, if not centuries, to develop. And here we are with an absolutely world-class region that it's almost unplumbed. And so the last 25, 30 years has been Washington State coming into its own and working at achieving its potential. And we've gotten in many respects, we've come a long ways, but what's absolutely the most exciting to me is that we're only now realizing what our absolute potential is. We're starting to see the quality of viticulture, not only at De Brule, but other vineyards coming up to the best of what we see in Napa, in Italy, and France, the top growing regions of the world. And the wines that are in barrel now that are coming out of these vineyards are,
hey, Carol,
they're incredible. I mean, it will blow your socks off. So this is one of the most exciting places in the world to be making wine, and one of the most exciting places to be growing grapes in the world, and I don't know that there's any other places like this you could point out in the world that are undergoing the kind of transformation and acceleration and absolute explosion of quality wines that we're seeing in Washington right now. It's the most exciting place in the world to be making wine right now, I think.
Yeah, and in result, the winemaker here is going to talk.
That's just my humble opinion.
We talk about age-worthy wines. I mean, you need acid, and our climate with our diurnal temperature shifts, our warm days but our cool nights, really retains that acidity.
And the basalt in the soils.
Yeah.
The volcanic soils that we have at higher elevations around the state is important. Anyway, go on, winemaker. Don't let me interrupt you.
Well, but I mean, when you can get wines that are balanced too, we have that good structure with our tannins, but you know, we're not, those things are going to allow the wines to age. And because of our climate and our soils,
winemaking.
Well, yeah, you know.
Well, the
intent
to make wines to age, because we make these differently. We make Train Station differently than we make the Côte Bonneville wines. I mean, they get more oxygen. They're cellar management. They get more oxygen. They get a little bit. They get pushed farther in the development so that when they're bottled, you can drink them now, but they're not necessarily intended to be consumed in 20, 30 years. Whereas some of the Côte wines, we manage the oxygen. They're tighter. They're kept a little more protected so that they will have that on that life cycle curve. They have more of that ahead of them. So you have to plan to make wines to age. They don't just happen. That's an intentional thing. You have to make wines to release, to be ready to drink when you want them to be ready to drink. I mean, that's part of the wine. So not that it's all about me, but it is a winemaking choice.
Mm-hmm. No, it's a choice.
So you told me to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, no. I think the biggest thing is knowing what you want to achieve and then do that to get there. Instead of being surprised when you get someplace else, I guess. I mean.
Yeah, anyway, I agree with Co that this is the most exciting place to make wine in the world right now. And just the fact that we can make so many different varieties, the fact that we can grow so many different varieties in one 45-acre vineyard is not something you can do in very many places all over the world. The fact that they all get made at a world-class level by ourselves and other people is really a testament to not only our vineyard, but it's also a testament to the Yakima Valley, and it's a testament to what Washington State can do. And it's exciting I can't wait to see where it's going to be in another 20 years. So, because it's only going to get better. I mean, we do so much research, the wines, everybody's focused on quality, and it's an exciting time to be making wine in Washington. Bye, Harvey. Enjoy your spaghetti. See you next week.
Uh-oh, spaghetti-o.
All right. Well, it is about time. I want to know, Ed, did you make my cinnamon rolls?
No.
Okay. Could you all these different varieties in Walla Walla are on the rocks? You have to have the right site. And the thing about, I'll go to our site for a minute, because when we talk about the different varieties, you can plant them. I mean, people plant all the different varieties all over the place. But to do them well, you have to have the right combination of factors, because latitude is an important factor. The fact that we have long days in the middle of summer is important. That's not any different in Yakima versus Walla Walla, in our vineyard versus Snipes Mountain. That's the same. But there's so many other details. It's not ever one thing. It's always those confluence of factors. And one of the things about our site, and I'll go back to the vineyard as a whole, that is really relevant is over here where you've got that Chardonnay on that north-facing slope and the Syrah on that west-southwest facing slope. If you only have the south-facing slope, you can't do Chardonnay because you need that little dip, you need that cooler microclimate to do Chardonnay, and then you need that intermediate to do Syrah and have them turn out the way they turn out. If you're going to plant a vineyard up here higher on the hills, which you can't because there's no water, but if you were going to, and it's just on this hillside, which is all south facing, you can't have the diversity of grapes that we grow. All of those things come together with the aspect, the geology, the variation around where are you, where your cold pockets, where all those things come together to say what can you plant or not plant. And so it's on the macro, it's really easy to say yes or no, but going back to what makes the wines better every year, it's those minutia details that don't seem important, but when you sum up 10,000 itty bitty decisions, that's the difference between average and great. It's lots of minuscule decisions. So, which makes it really hard to answer those questions. But that's, at the end of the day, in whatever you do, you know that what makes you better at your job isn't one thing. It's a lot of little things. It's judgment. It's not any different than anything else. It takes a long time to do. And so there are any varietals that you don't think you could grow. We could not grow Pinot because Mom won't let us, and because Pinot doesn't do well in Washington. But I think we started out with the intention of matching the varietal to the site. And we worked with Wade Wolf, who is one of the preeminent viticulturalists. At the time, he was the preeminent viticulturalist in the state. He planted grapes and worked with grapes around the state. And we looked at what's the temperature profile, what's the soil profile. We dug pits, we dug big holes all over the place to look at what does the ground look like here. What is it on the surface, but what is it, feet down, like going 6 feet down and looking at the soil profiles. And we planted it based on what would grow well here. Whereas many vineyards are planted with, especially when you get into like the Central Valley of California, they plant vineyards like, okay, there's a need for Malbec's the new hot variety, we're going to plant Malbec. Or Sideways came out, we need Pinot because people want to drink Pinot now, let's plant Pinot. And it didn't matter if the site was actually adapted to the varietal. I actually did a radio show years ago with somebody they were like, that's what's really cool about you. You actually planted your grapes, what would grow there. Yeah, Jim?
You could ask, there you go, Jimmy, ask her.
Oh, I've been trying to send a chat and doesn't seem to go. What am I doing?
What's your question?
We'll just chat it out.
My question was, how did you know that something was special about the vineyard early on?
Well, as we said, we started as a commercial vineyard. And we used to go to all of our customers religiously and taste the wine in their barrels, and quote, get our report card. And if you do that enough years and you start tasting through barrels and you start tasting your wines, and the winemakers are telling you, wow, this is different. This is special. And winemakers are telling us it just takes 5% of your grapes to elevate our blends. You begin to start realizing that, it's distinctive. So like I said, it was many years of tasting through barrels with other winemakers and knowing that our wine was distinctive. And then, like I said, when the kids left home, I remember sitting in a conference and the big screens we had gotten. Washington State was the wine growing region of the year, winery region, whatever. And I thought that's silly because we traveled a lot, and you couldn't find Washington wine. I mean, you could
What
find.
side of the Potomac do your grapes grow on?
Yeah, I mean, you could find a few of the big guys. You could find Saint Michel. You could find Hogue. You could find Waterbrook in those days. You could find Le Cole. I mean, there were a few wines you could find, but you couldn't find any really wines.
I like this, by the way. If you guys didn't make this, you should make this.
Yeah, it's pretty easy too. And so when we, like I said, when we started, our focus was, we thought Washington was pretty special. We'd been drinking wines since the 70s when we lived in California, which is kind of when they sort of started with their industry. And so we were wine drinkers. And we felt that Washington was special. We felt that our vineyard was special. And our focus was to put Washington on the map and to make wines that belonged with the best of the best, to say that Washington could compete. And like I said, those are pretty lofty goals, and I spent a lot of nights laying awake at bed thinking, everybody's telling us we can't do this. It's only costing money, and more money. But we stuck to what we were trying to do, and be it dumb or whatever, it's time. It just takes, you can't get there fast. And you can't deviate what you're trying to do. And there's lots of squirrels out there, bright shiny objects, and you want to go, and you can't. We felt you couldn't do that. So we stayed very focused. We stayed very true to what we wanted to do. And I would like to hope to think that we have helped to bring the Washington wine industry up and to be part of the, today is a very different industry than it was in those days. I can't tell you how many times I did market visits, and Carrie's right, what side of the Potomac are you on? I mean, Washington State was still a territory if you went past east of the Mississippi. But it's not that way anymore. We're still not to the degree.
I love it. Jim, empty that bottle. Empty it.
But it's fun to be part of it. It's fun to see how it's developed. It's fun to have felt that we have been a part of this. It's fun when people from Europe, and I have people come into the tasting room, and I always ask them, I said, how did you find out about us? And they said, oh, Jancis Robinson referred, yes. And that's like, that's pretty cool. Or Hugh Johnson calls me up and wants my wine for his wine club. I mean, those are pretty cool things. Jeannie Cho Lee, when those people call you and know your vineyard and want their wines for their conferences in Germany's or wherever, then you've done a little bit to put Washington on the map. And that's the really fun part for us. I mean, that's what it's all about. Because wine is...
There's a lot of wine in the world.
There's a lot of wine in the world. And there's a lot of good wine in the world. But special wine is just really fun to be part of.
That's terrific. Thank you.
All right. Do we have any other, I feel like that's a good mic drop and she's out kind of moment, but on that note, I guguess we'll see, unless there's any other comments, I guess we'll see you guys next week. Any other comments?
We'll see if Harvey's our guest chef or if it's back to me.
Yeah, so if Harvey doesn't come through with wonderful ideas, and also we love getting recipes from you guys. It's fun too, even if you think my cinnamon rolls are hard to make. That's why I don't make them very often, Ed. So send us something easy that you like to pair with Chardonnay. Or Cote is coming, so June, we're looking at you for Cote recipe. So, all right. Well, enjoy the rest of your evenings, people, and good to see you. We'll see y'all next week.
Yep. Oh, the vineyard.
Thanks.
It was great.
Thank you.
Thanks a bunch.
No, not our vineyard. Vineyard tastings.
Oh yeah, come to the
Thursday.
vineyard tastings next week.
Thursday.
If you're not already signed up, Tony's already signed up. But the vineyard tastings with Jonathan Sauer is doing next Thursday at 5:30. It's gonna be super cool. You want to be there. All right. We'll see you.
But he's not making food, so just bring whatever you want.
All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Okay.
I know. Jonathan.